For decades, one question about Joseph Stalin seemed permanently unanswerable. Where did he actually come from? His birth certificate named him Ioseb Jughashvili of Gori, Georgia, son of Ekaterine Geladze and Vissarion Jughashvili, a humble craftsman. But whispers swirled around his lineage. He never built an empire on any racial mythos like Hitler, yet even he felt compelled to shroud his origins. The older he got, the more Stalin clammed up about his family. Official Soviet biographies almost erase his youth, quietly downplaying the fact that he was Georgian. The mystery only deepened behind his silence. And for nearly 100 years, the question hung in the air. Who was Stalin's father really? The man in the record or someone else altogether? Throughout Stalin's life, rumors abounded. In the bazaars of Tiflis, one tale had it that his real father was not Vissarion the cobbler, but a shadowy local magnate. In other circles, someone insisted Stalin was secretly Ossetian, another Caucasus people rather than Georgian. The surname Jughashvili itself raised eyebrows. Some linguistic sleuths noted that Jugayev is a common Ossetian name meaning herd of sheep, and older Ossetian families often bore Georgian-style suffixes. Even Stalin's mistress-turned-wife, Georgiana Orgenikidze, would jokingly call him the Ossetian-hearted one. The famous poet Osip Mandelstam even hinted at this whisper in verse. Behind the mask, the Ossetian chest swells. But Stalin himself never confirmed any of this. He clammed up on the question of his bloodline. When foreigners tried to quiz him about Gori, or when someone raised a sign claiming Stalin's childhood home during the war, Stalin flew into a rage and ordered it removed. His only clue, a brief mention in a private letter that he was of Georgian peasant stock, was maddeningly vague. The only hint he gave at all was a shadowy reference to a cobbler from the Caucasus, which could have been anyone in that region. Even his mother died early, and no one alive after World War II wanted to talk. The question that no one could answer for decades remained open. Who actually fathered Joseph Stalin Jughashvili? Was it Vissarion the shoemaker, as the church records say? Was it that supposed powerful Ossetian Koba Ignatashvili, rumored in private letters, or was it someone else entirely? Then a wild story surfaced that seemed unrelated. A Siberian pensioner claimed the dictator had a secret family line. Yuri Davidov, a retired engineer, had always believed his grandmother Lydia was once a lover of Stalin's in Siberian exile. Lydia, a village girl of 14, had given birth to a son, Alexander, in 1917 and raised him as the Davidov family's child. For years, historians laughed off these whispers. To them, it didn't fit the Stalin they knew, the stern commissar who ruled with an iron fist and would never admit a forgotten child. There was no mention in the archives, only family gossip. Legendary biographers like Robert Service and Simon Montefiore dismissed the saga as idle legend. They pointed out there was no hard evidence. The story rested on a few half-remembered poems and a dismissed police report. In effect, Stalin's supposed son was as invisible in the official story as his own pedigree. And then came DNA, the force that upends such mysteries in ways earlier generations could not imagine. In 2016, Russian genealogists decided to put the rumor to the test. They obtained a saliva sample from Alexander Bedonsky, Stalin's official grandson, the son of Stalin's son Vasily. And they convinced Yuri Davidov to spit into a tube too. The plan was simple: compare Y chromosomes. The Y chromosome passes almost unchanged from father to son. If Alexander Bedonsky and Yuri Davidov shared a paternal ancestor, their Y DNA would match. The results were stunning. The test showed a 99.98% match between Davidov and Bedonsky. In other words, Yuri really was the grandson of Stalin. That headline was impossible to ignore. The Siberian Times splashed it in 2016. Siberian pensioner is grandson of Joseph Stalin, DNA test reveals. This DNA proof confirmed Lydia's secret to an eerie certainty. She had indeed carried Stalin's child. In the midst of all the geopolitics, biology had whispered a personal truth. But the story wasn't that simple. Headlines crowed about secret progeny, but missed the bigger picture. Behind those matching genes was another revelation, and a complication. The Y-chromosome markers turned out to belong to haplogroup G2A1. To a geneticist's ear, that would have sounded very familiar. Haplogroup G2A1 is precisely the kind most Caucasus men carry. It's not some foreign allele, it's the hallmark of the region. Over 30% of Georgian men today belong to haplogroup G2A, and many Ossetians, especially in the North Caucasus, carry it too. Some media hyperventilated. One outlet tried to turn it into a nationalist scoop. DNA confirms Stalin was 100% Georgian, it declared. Another whispered, Ossetian blood flows in Stalin's veins, not Georgian, clinging to old rumors, but both takes glossed over the nuance. A geneticist looking at those markers would shrug. Stalin's Y-DNA simply tells us his male ancestry came from the Caucasus. That aligns exactly with his birth certificate. It doesn't single out Georgian royal or Ossetian warrior, just Caucasian farmer. In truth, having haplogroup G2A1 says nothing more exotic than that the Jughashvili men were one of the local branches of humanity found around Tbilisi and Vladikavkaz. The headline missed the point. It's like saying someone with brown eyes is a Caucasian, but that covers millions of people. Professor Maria Popov at Tbilisi University noted that 60% of ethnic North Ossetians carry a form of G2A, while roughly 30% of Georgians do as well. In other words, the Y-DNA belonged to exactly the set of lineages in the mountains where Stalin's family lived. Carrying this marker says nothing unique. It could be Georgian or Ossetian or simply Caucasus stock. That's where things get strange. The DNA didn't uncover an unexpected racial heritage or a foreign branch. Instead, it confirmed what church records had already said all along. Stalin's paternal line was Jughashvili, exactly as documented. If an unknown outsider had secretly fathered him, a Russian or a Turk or some Cossack, the Y chromosome would be totally different. The perfect match to Alexander B's sample proved the Jughashvili line was unbroken, just as the Soviet birth certificate claimed. It silently refuted any theory that Stalin's real father wasn't on the books. The only surprise DNA held was that other line with the secret son. But even that was just a confirmation of the obvious truth that Stalin's blood had quietly continued. You might expect a twist, like Stalin had a hidden Jewish grandfather, or Stalin was part Central Asian. But no, genetics said he was a local Caucasus man with a local Caucasus male line. The haplogroup G2A1 result wasn't sensational, it was almost banal in context. Still, the DNA gave one more secret, or perhaps put it bluntly. Once the geneticists had the sequence, they looked deeper for anything interesting. But unlike Hitler, Stalin's genome didn't reveal a tidy explanation for his life story. There was no cryptic disease marker, no polygenic risk score to embarrass his ideology. He died of a stroke at 74, apparently unaware he had any unusual genetic variant. In fact, any modern analysis of his DNA would emphasize how normal it was for a man of his background. It only underscored that his horrors were a matter of the mind and politics, not destiny in the genome. What this means is unnerving. Joseph Stalin, who built a cult around himself and constantly rewrote history for loyalty's sake, can scarcely believe how differently genetics tells his story. If he could have read those results in secret, what would he conclude? He prided himself on power, not lineage. In Hitler's case, the DNA highlighted an ironic genetic falsity. His beloved Aryan master race would have judged him unworthy. For Stalin, the mirror is less cruel. His genes say simply, he was exactly who he said he was, a Georgian. No hidden kingmaker, no secret traitor, just a man from Gori. Yet the obsessive question of ancestry casts a long shadow. It might have given him comfort to think he had some grand origin or special blood, but the cold truth is less glamorous. The fact that we chase these answers for so long only to find something so ordinary raises a quiet question. Why did it matter so much? Does knowing Stalin's haplogroup G2A1 tell us anything about his choices? Of course not. His cruelty and paranoia had nothing to do with a mutation or a family tree. If anything, this story shows that our search for genetic meaning in history can mislead us. As the dust settled, one thing became clear. Stalin's own obsession with myth-making around birth was revealed as yet another political act. He expected others to bow to his cult of personality, yet here he was, revealed as merely human. The silent, blood-stained sofa of Lydia's home is gone, but the truth endures in the codes of his descendants. In the tangled parish records of Gori, his father's name remains Jughashvili. If Stalin's DNA teaches us one thing definitive, it might be this: the legend of extraordinary origins was a lie. The child of Georgia grew into a Soviet tyrant through ambition, not aristocracy. So, in the end, what does Stalin's DNA really say? It reminds us that history's most fearsome figures are still made of common atoms. Joseph Stalin was not born of dragons or demigods. His genome was entirely human, Caucasian through and through. Yet that knowledge doesn't lessen the mysteries of his soul or the terror he wrought. It forces us to ask the final question: if not heritage, then what shapes a tyrant? If you want more stories where DNA flips history on its head, subscribe. The next one might surprise you.